Should an athlete convicted of a violent crime during their season of play be allowed to continue to participate in sports? Zach, yes. Hannah, no.
An athlete convicted of a violent crime during their season of playing should not be able to continue to participate in their sport.
Professional athletes convicted of a violent crime should be allowed to play the sport due to the violent crimes not being committed in the sport, and most convicted athletes serve time.
Athletes convicted of violent crimes should not be allowed by their schools or sports organizations to continue to play in their sport. For example, a college Florida State University player, DeAndre Johnson, punched a woman in the face in a bar off campus and proven guilty with video evidence and arrested after he was charged with a misdemeanor in 2015. After being proven guilty in court and testified against by the victim, he was suspended indefinitely. So you may be wondering why this is something I'm discussing, even though the player who was accused and put on trial was not able to return to their football team. This is because this is an example of justice that did occur where the player who committed these violent crimes, including injury of another person, had to face their consequences. And this justice was brought by the college by saying that they did not want this player to represent the College of Florida State University. This university should be an example to other universities and sports organizations like the NFL to stand against people who resort to violence out of anger.
They should be allowed to play because the violent crimes aren't committed in the sport. The NFL has the worst domestic violent crimes out of any other sport. However, since the year 2000, there has not been one arrest of any player or anyone who was involved in the NFL who had any kind of violence inside the sport. All of the arrests that came from the NFL players who committed the domestic violence was outside at like a casino or bar. It had nothing to do with the sport. So they should not, or they should be able to keep playing because they're not posing a threat to other athletes on the field.
Colleges and organizations like the NFL should not allow violent players to return to their sport in order to salvage their own reputations and the reputations of their players. For example, NFL player Kareem Hunt gives NFL players a bad name. At the beginning of 2018, in February, Kareem Hunt shoved and kicked a 19-year-old girl outside of his hotel room as they both were arguing and exchanging heated words. After this incident, the case was looked into while Hunt was still allowed to continue playing football for the Kansas City Chiefs. However, in November, a video came out of what occurred in the hotel, and Kareem was released from the Kansas City Chiefs. However, after missing 8 games, Kareem was still allowed to return to the football team when he was signed on to the Cleveland Browns as of last February 2019. This is yet another example of injustice that occurred after another violent act by an NFL player. This also shows that not only did the coaches and NFL not suspend this player indefinitely as they should have, but they allowed this athlete to continue to play as if nothing had occurred. Not only does this affect the reputation of the NFL and the coaches, but it could possibly lead to the harm of players on the athlete's team or players on the opposing teams on the field.
Most athletes convicted of a violent crime serve their time and continue playing. We can see this through 2 examples, Leonard Little and Dante Stallworth. Leonard Little was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, served 3 months in federal prison, and he continued playing football and retired in 2009. After he served his time, he did not pose a threat to any other athletes on the field. He didn't have any misconduct within the NFL. After he had the involuntary manslaughter, he learned his lesson. He did not pose a threat to any other athlete on the field, so therefore he should have been able to keep playing, and he did. You can also see this through Dante Stallworth, convicted of DUI manslaughter, served 30 days incarceration and 2 years of house arrest. After done serving that, he went on to retire in 2013 with the Redskins. Then again, he did not pose a threat to any other player on the field, and he did not have any violent conduct with any of his teammates, so therefore he should be able to keep playing, and he did.
Although the women hurt or abused or physically assaulted in these 2 situations, Although the women hurt or physically assaulted in these two situations struck first or provoked the action of each of these athletes, this does not excuse the stronger male athletes of beating these women. Although this does not excuse the actions of these athletes that were accused, even though these men were exonerated of their crimes against these women, there should be further punishment in the future. For example, if you imagine that those girls were a sister or a friend, and if they met some guys and that resulted in them being shoved, kicked, and yelled at, you most likely would be angry at the lack of consequences for these players. And even though these violent acts did not occur on the field, this does not diminish the acts of these athletes. And if these athletes become angry enough to strike a woman, then how do we know if that athlete wouldn't just hurt someone that frustrates them in a game? And like what you said about the player, that even though he committed this crime and he was fine after that and didn't hurt anyone, that doesn't set an example for other football players in the NFL.
Some may argue that even though they are doing time and the violence isn't in the sport, they still shouldn't be allowed to play because they're still being violent towards others, which could put other athletes on the field in danger. However, we can see that this claim is incorrect because of the fact that, again, there was no arrest of players that were violent against other players, which therefore they don't pose a threat to any other athlete on the field. Done.